Brian Laundrie is still on the run, this as he continues to be a person of interest in the Gabby Petito case. And it looks like even his own sister is growing tired of it. This week, Cassie Laundrie told protesters outside of her home that she does not know Brian's whereabouts and that her family's been ignoring her since the disappearance of her brother. Listen.
I've been on
What happened?
I don't know what happened.
Yeah. The thing about it is we know Gabby's family. Gabby,
we do too.
What do you want us to do?
We cooperate with the police. We're not supposed to talk to anybody, and you're making my children cry.
Was Brian with you on September 1st? Did he come to this house?
Yes, he came to this house with my parents in their Mustang, not the van. I did not know that he took that van back. I found out the next day with everybody else. We are just as upset, frustrated, and heartbroken as everybody else. And I am losing my parents and my brother and my children's aunt and my future sister-in-law on top of this, and you're not helping me.
Why your parents? Why your parents? You're talking about
because they're not talking to us either.
Why aren't they talking to you guys?
If I knew, I would say. I don't know.
Do you think they're involved, your parents?
I don't know.
Don't know. You don't know.
We know
You're not
nothing.
Involved?
We have literally been finding everything out with the news with like everybody else. My kids are upset. You're upsetting my neighbors, and all we want to do is let you guys know that we don't know.
Taking it a step further, Cassie then went on Good Morning America and urged Brian to come forward.
I worry about him. I hope he's okay. And then I'm angry and I don't know what to think. I would tell my brother to just come forward and get us out of this horrible mess.
And now detailing the last time she saw her brother.
The last time I physically saw it and the last time I physically spoke to my brother was on the 6th. I've tried to get in touch with him. Phone went to voicemail.
Cassie sharing this photo exclusively with ABC News, showing Brian and his 5-year-old nephew camping at Fort DeSoto Park with their parents 5 days before Gabby was reported missing.
We just went for a couple of hours and we ate dinner and had s'mores around the campfire and left. And there was nothing peculiar about it. There was no feeling of grand goodbye. There was nothing. I'm frustrated that in hindsight I didn't pick up on anything. It was just a regular visit.
And she's not alone. Petito's family is also saying Brian Laundrie should stop being a, quote, coward and turn himself in.
What would you say to him if he's watching this right this minute?
This is where I should wash my mouth, right?
Turn yourself in.
Turn yourself in.
Turn yourself in. Turn yourself in.
Turn yourself in.
Join me now to weigh in, criminal defense attorney and anchor at Law and Crime Network, Bob Bianchi. Bob, thank you so much for joining me. So, Bob, a lot of updates in this case. Obviously, Brian's still on the run. He's still missing. It seems like, you know, all the clues that they've had, like nothing's turning up. I mean, it's so outrageous that his parents are being so quiet still. I mean, so much so they're not even speaking to their daughter, according to their daughter.
Yes, Stephanie, we talked about this before because the ball was dropped in the beginning of this case. As a former homicide prosecutor and a head of a prosecutorial agency, when I am trying to get people to talk, I do it in a nice way because they're inclined to talk because they don't want to be considered persons of interest or suspects. So you bring them in and you do the nicey nice thing to get them to talk. But when they got out there and started calling Brian a person of interest and the family are bad people and they're not cooperating and they went to a lawyer, there's not a criminal defense lawyer in the world that would not tell them, shut down, don't speak about anything so that you don't wind up getting yourself in trouble. So from the very beginning, it's quite understandable from the physics of a criminal case as to why Brian went on the run. The fact they didn't have him under surveillance is another shocking thing to me. But Brian went on the run, and why the family's not talking. I mean, there's nothing unusual about it other than the publicity of this case.
So you're saying that the parents still being so quiet on everything, like they have not done a press conference or anything, like we haven't heard anything from the parents. You're saying that that is bad advice from an attorney. So if you were giving them advice, you tell them to speak out and say what they know.
No, I would not tell them to do that.
Oh,
no,
why not?
Exactly. Because their law enforcement's already saying, people are already out there saying things like, well, if they lie to the police, they may get charged with some sort of obstruction or tampering with evidence, or they may have been involved in the after the fact cover-up of this. So if you go to a defense lawyer and say all these things are being said about me, we don't know what law enforcement thinks or doesn't think, the lawyer's going to say, don't speak publicly about anything because anything you say can be used against you. And again, I always go back to this point, and I'm coming from a prosecutor's point of view. I prosecuted homicides for years, is that the right to remain silent protects the innocent and the guilty. So what I'm saying is that law enforcement and this lawyer for the family, respectfully, and I feel horrible for them, but the more they go out there and they keep hammering the family, they're losing the tactical advantage of getting the family to cooperate because they're going to pucker up because they don't want to be considered suspects. And that's why the lawyer's telling them, don't speak. That's the advice any defense lawyer would give. And as prosecutors, we know that. So we do it nice and nice. We don't go on TV and start calling them bad people and persons of interest and suspects because you know what a defense lawyer is going to say in response to that. You bring them in and say, we know you want to help. We know that you want to get to the right place and do the right thing. And you want to try to kind of convince them to do the right thing. But once they got on the radar of law enforcement and once these press conferences started happening, we lost Brian and nobody can find where he is. And they shut down the family.
Yeah.
It's basic.
And as you're pointing out, just like from a non-legal point of view, looking at how the parents are reacting and acting and not talking, it makes it seem like they're guilty, and then their attorney's giving them advice on just not to talk so that they don't further incriminate themselves and get themselves in more trouble. And so you think that these parents, Brian, Gabby lived in that house for like a year or something, and they've known her for so many years, and it just seems just really cold-hearted that they're just, it's like almost like they don't even care. And then that one statement that they released about when Gabby's body was found just also just seemed like so out of touch, like what's wrong with these people? Either way, we're also finding out too, I don't know if you saw this, but originally the parents gave a date on when Brian left the house. It turns out that they've changed their mind, that it was a different date. So originally they said he had left the home on Tuesday, September 14th, but now they're saying that their son went to go hiking on Monday, September 13th, so they can't even keep the facts straight on that. You'd think if you're giving that information over to authorities, you probably would make sure that you have it right the first time. Like, how do you mess that up?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, by them speaking, you're proving the point. They're coming up with differing and conflicting stories and potentially putting themselves at risk with regard to not giving law enforcement the right information. So, again, they should have spoken that case. But what do I make of it? Listen, all of this conduct, Brian disappearing, leaving without his phone or his wallet, the way the family is acting, it's damning looking, and prosecutors down the road will use that to show what we call consciousness of guilt. Those are things that show consciousness of guilt. Now, the fact is, it's rebuttable because people have done, and I've been around the block long enough to know, all sorts of crazy and weird things. And I don't know whether or not he's doing that because law enforcement was calling him a person of interest, or whether or not he, in fact, is the person that committed a homicide. But obviously, prosecutors will use this if they determine he's the one who did this, as showing the family's reaction to it and his reaction to it, show consciousness of guilt as part of the proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he's the one who committed the homicide, should they charge that. Yeah,
and then another fact here. So Brian Laundrie had stolen and used Gabby Petito's credit card 3 days after she was missing. He made those charges. The FBI has accused Brian Laundrie of debit card fraud. That's not a good look either.
Yeah, well, people are using the word stole the credit card, and I don't know where those pieces are coming in. I know why they charged him. He used the credit card, and, unfortunately, we don't have Gabby here to tell us whether or not he had permission to do that or not. But they filed those charges, and they have a grand jury impanel because it gives them more power on the investigative side to continue to look into this case. But, yeah, I mean, certainly at the end of the day, prosecutors will make that argument that he stole the card inferentially, because Gabby, again, is not here to tell us, in order to get the cash so that he could flee. And again, flight is consciousness of guilt.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, people deserve due process and whatnot, but it's rather bizarre that she goes missing. So 3 days after she vanished, he's out using her card with her name on it. And so
yes, Stephanie, the point here that's really important, I'm sorry to cut you off, is that as a prosecutor, you've got to think of all of these angles that the defense attorney is going to come up with. And I just hope they don't rush and don't dot I's and cross T's like I've seen in many sloppy homicide investigations. Rule out all sorts of other people. Don't be pigeonholed. So this way, that when the defense gets up there to say law enforcement jumped to conclusions, they could say, no, we even investigated even beyond what we needed to, even after we had a suspect, just to make sure we got it right.
Yeah, and then again, one more time, you said this last time we were discussing the case, is that even though, like, you know, all signs are kind of pointing to Brian Laundrie here, you've been surprised in many cases in your time as an attorney, the people that you think are guilty end up like not being the person.
I have had a number, more than a handful of cases where my detectives were about to put cuffs on in a domestic, it's usually a domestic case, bad divorce, domestic violence history, so on and so forth. We slowed that roll down because we hadn't dotted those I's and crossed those T's. And it turned out in the end, somebody else was the one who committed the murder. So that's why, one, you shouldn't jump to a conclusion as a prosecutor. You got to have one side of your brain that knows what all the facts are and keep the other side open and not get pigeonholed so that you don't certainly charge an innocent person, but if you charge the right person, you don't give the defense opportunities to say that you were sloppy. But that has happened, Stephanie, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the manhunt will continue, and obviously this case is talked about so much that it's going to be really hard for him to continue to hide, and we know Dog the Bounty Hunter is on it, so hopefully he'll find him too. Anyways, we're going to leave it here. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you. Coming up next.